The question now is that the reports relevant to the external sector be noted. Mark Bishop.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, firstly, can I start by acknowledging the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Select Committee and David Shearer, who sits on that committee and is in the House tonight. Can I also acknowledge Lieutenant General Tim Keating, our Chief of New Zealand Defence Forces, and the Chief Executive of MFAT, Brooke Barrington. There's a fair bit to get through in 5 minutes, but can I just firstly say to our New Zealand Defence Forces, the men and women that are serving overseas, we're proud of you. You do a great job. You're wonderful ambassadors for New Zealand. We've deployed recently to Fiji, where they've been hit with a terrible natural disaster. We've seen the deployment of the HMNZS Canterbury, which has carried the main New Zealand Defence Force contingent, including relief supplies, Army engineers and helicopters. We sent up 2 Navy SH-2G Sea Sprites. We sent up 2 of our new NH-90s now that are obviously operational and doing a very good job, as well as our Army Light Engineering Unit. We've also got an Orion, P3 Orion up there, and we've also got the Wellington, the HMNZS Wellington, which I want to make a special mention of because the captain of the Wellington is also lives in my electorate of Rodney. I also want to touch on very quickly the work that our team are doing up in Taji, at Camp Taji, just outside of Baghdad. And during the reviews, we asked the Deputy Chief of Defence Forces about how that deployment was going. And we learnt that in the last 18 months, since the coalition began operations, Daesh has lost around 40% of its territory, which is significant, and this has been achieved by support provided by the Iraqi forces through airstrikes and a slow but steady campaign of targeting individuals and, of course, their supply routes. Weekly charts are compiled using satellite imagery and intelligence and show that there is a change of dominance in Iraq and who controls that territory. So I want to acknowledge our troops up at Taji because the work that they're doing, just their mere presence there, sends a very positive message to the Iraqi forces that are having to go out and meet this threat and are obviously doing all that they can to seriously degrade Daesh and the threat that they pose. I just want to talk very quickly about also the role that we're playing through MFAT and our position on the UN Security Council and some of the work that's been done there, and especially in relation to, again, I'll come to Daesh, but the progress that we've made on the Syrian humanitarian issues in the Middle East. As a co-leader on the Syrian humanitarian issues, New Zealand has been at the forefront of the Council's efforts to alleviate the humanitarian effects of the Syrian conflict. This includes leading work to reinforce protection standards and principles supporting healthcare in the armed conflict. And I'm very proud of the fact that our people in New York on the UN Security Council have taken a genuine leadership role in making sure that we could actually open up the supply or the supply routes into Syria to make sure that proper humanitarian aid and medical assistance and food got through to the refugees that have been cut off from that for a long time. And we saw pretty heartbreaking stories on TV about children that were having to try and exist on eating grass. The work that's been done on the UN Security Council also involves the degradation of Daesh in the sense that the sanctions that have been imposed on Daesh are having an effect. We're encouraged to hear that Daesh is having to levy its members now for financial contributions because the sanctions regime is starting to affect its financial resources, and bearing in mind that because of the territory that Daesh actually had, is that they had a fair amount of resources available to them, especially oil and petrochemicals, to actually be able to generate a fair bit of revenue that was actually funding and feeding their terror attacks and their war against Iraq and neighbouring countries. We also actually chair the Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee as part of our UN Security Council role. So I just want to acknowledge the work that has been done by our personnel in New York on the UN Security Council. The other very important piece of work that's been done that we feel very strongly about as Kiwis is around the veto that the permanent 5 countries have. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
David Shearer.